Welcome to the Independence by Design podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a business owner and ways to get unstuck from the day-to-day so we can design a business that gives us a life of independence. Tom Shipley is a serial entrepreneur and investor, and he's on the podcast today to talk about acquisitions and how acquisitions can help you compound your valuation in a way that gets you out of the valley of despair that he calls the $1 million to $2 million in normalized EBITDA. Tom has a ton of experience in M&A because he took a company that was floundering around and barely had any cash to acquiring one of the largest firms in their sector and then scaling that up for 18 years and crazy success of direct to consumer. Ends up raising $100 million for an Amazon aggregator and has a ton of experience in how acquisitions can get you out of that valley of despair into the point where your valuation is meaningful and worth all the effort. As Tom and I round out the end of the podcast, we start talking about how true integration actually provides the cash flow that represents and supports that normalized EBITDA, because there's a lot of games we play with normalized EBITDA where people gobble together a bunch of EBITDA and then sell it. He calls it the Frankenstein, versus actually recognizing those synergies and generating cash, because oxygen is the cash flow. And Tom's got a very unique way of approaching this new venture that he's involved in, where there's a lot of synergies first, they merge them all together, and then they package them up and sell them. And I think he's onto something really special, because the integration is the hard work that I have not seen a lot of people do effectively over the last 5 to 6 years. And I'm very intrigued to see how Tom pulls this off. Regardless, I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation and get to hear and think about the name of the game of capitalism and valuation and deal structures from someone who's been there, done that over the last couple of decades. So without further ado, here's my interview with Tom. All right. Well, Tom, such a pleasure to have you here. I think, in the 30-minute pre-call, it was a month ago or something like that, and probably could have kept going for hours. And so I'm very, very excited. And we were just talking about, as we're rounding up the end of the year, what do we stop doing? And I think this ties into the conversation I want to have is, where do you determine where you want to spend your time and how value is created and how to align your potential and the value that's potentially able to be created? And how do you think about value and time?
Ryan, great question. So I'll start with this: I'm an entrepreneur, which means I'm an optimist, which means that unless I think about it, I have unlimited time, unlimited resources, and I can accomplish everything. And I see so many opportunities that are out there, and really problems that someone needs to solve. And why not me? The reality is the opposite is true, regardless of the hubris we have as entrepreneurs. Is we have a finite amount of time and the finite resources, and therefore it's never a question of resources, question of resourcefulness, and therefore we have to pick our priorities. And so this is just a magnificent time of year. It's winding down the year and we get to think about the year ahead. So I like to take a breath and think about what is really important to me. And it always starts with family. Again, it's so easy because we're so excited with so much to do, just to jump in and to say what we're going to accomplish in our current business, what future opportunities are out there, what big things we're doing. But really starts with it is, I'd say, how do I want to show up for my family? And what can I do to basically, what are the special memories that I want to create with them? So I carve out that time and try to be very intentional about it. But then the next thing is, the next thing is that I think about from a priority perspective. And what I love to do is to think about 5 years from now. And this is the thing I love to do all the time. And I do this almost daily basis, whether it's 1 year from now or 5 years from now, looking back. And again, since I'm looking at the year in 2026, what am I going to look back and say the biggest thing that I accomplished? What is the biggest impact I had on my family, my future, on my community, my environment, and on this world? And therefore, let me take a step back and breathe and identifying those things that are priorities. And that quickly helps me eliminate. And I look at all the opportunities in front of me. And I like to rank stack them based on different criteria. But ultimately, what is it exactly is going to have the biggest impact into my goals in life. And for me, that's about, I think we talked about this, Ryan, on our last call is for me, my two drivers in life are impact and adventure. And impact is divided into those people around me, family and close friends, but then also, and my community. But that also means that um, who do I want to focus my attention and resources and have that impact on them? And then a life of adventure, which means excitement and everything that makes me energy.
So what I love about what you're saying, and it's very interesting, Tom, because I think we talked about a little bit of this, and not shocking that we think a lot the same from that conversation is contextualizing the real resources we have. Because what I heard you say, and it's similar to what I do, is admitting the top, the whole rocks, pebbles, sand, water thing, and in the bottle. I don't know if you ever heard that. I mean, a lot of people
Yep.
probably have. And so you say, okay, well, I've got to spend time with my personal. I got to get my, my own stuff together. With my health wise. Then I got my family. So then you say, okay, well, roughly, if we got 40 hours a week, what am I going to do with that? So what I heard you say is you contextualize the real resources that are there and how you're going to spend that time with the adventure and the impact, and then how does business fit into there? So then you're actually able to then stack rank your priorities in business. And what I find interesting, Tom, and then one of the topics I want to unpack with you is how you're determining, with your entrepreneurial background of growing and selling a couple brands, and then raising money, and like also now with your PE venture, of how you're doing that differently than other ways that you could structure capital. It's really kind of identifying like, okay, what is the spectrum of options on how to deploy time and resources and how you think about that. And I think it's really helpful for us to understand how limited that time is, because then it makes us choose where to spend the time. So I say all that because I think it's going to be interesting to hear how you think about where you're spending time in business and how you think about where you could spend your time, because you started off doing one venture, right? Like you started off in a business. So maybe kind of give us that story arc of how you've thought differently and how you spend your 40 to 50 hours a week differently now that you know what you know.
So let me start with the core philosophy that I have in life. And that is that I have a belief that we all have this responsibility. And what's responsibility is we all are writing our own novel. It's our epic novel. It's not to be judged by other people. It's our epic novel. And every chapter we have responsibility to make epic as we define that should be. And to me, my chapters are 5 year periods of time, plus minus. And I like to every 5 years take a step back and to say, is this what I want to spend the next 5 years doing? What is the biggest impact that I can have that gives me energy, that makes life worthwhile, especially looking back in my life many years from now and saying, what did I spend my chapters? And what is this next chapter looking like? So if we go through and sometimes my chapters can go like they did when myself and my partner, we were building beauty brands. That chapter lasted for 18 years. Why is I loved it and we kept on, and we were living in New Jersey and life was great. So we kept on reading up on that.
Was it like a section and then there was a couple chapters in that section, I'm
Yeah,
assuming?
yeah. So yeah. I mean, oh my God, yes. I mean, basically is quick story is you start off with zero with a big ambition. You promise your wife you'll never go all in again. A year later, you're financially tapped. You don't know how you're going to feed your two young daughters. The business hits 331,000 in revenue, but if the metrics are good, the business looks good, but you can't borrow, you can't get investors, you're done. And I think I share with you is what do you do when you run out of money? I learned this in my first business is you buy a business. So we bought, and I found a business. We basically bought a $15 million business in Hoboken, New Jersey, doing $1.5 million in profit a year, but it had everything that business needed from tech staff, great internet marketers, designer, develop everything. We put our little brand on top of this. And within 3 years, our little $331,000 brand on top of this $15 million business, within 3 years, we did $100 million and did $1 billion in that first skincare brand. And
How
again,
did you let's double click on that real quick, because I thought it was a fascinating story, like how you bought a business. So it's kind of the whole minnow eating the whale. And how did you structure that? And like how did you land on that? Because I know that's going to be, one of your core premises here as we unpack the theme.
so there are so many ways to to buy businesses. A quick stat for everyone, just change your paradigm, is there are 1,000 business owners that will retire every day. 75% of those businesses will be attempted to sell and will never find a buyer, and they will just close down. And that is the opportunity. So forget about what you think your business is worth and what you sell your business for. You have to understand what the seller is. Now you can do creative deal structures. And if you're buying businesses that are growing, that are very profitable, you can typically always, not always, but typically always raise money for it. So in this case, two good business guys with good business background, myself and my partner, when we went and found this growing business in Hoboken, New Jersey, it was 5 years old. It was growing every year. It was very profitable. So we were able to go out and find lenders, and especially credit was mezzanine lenders, and they lent us the money to buy 85% of that business. We negotiated a really good deal on that. And then ultimately they rolled over and kept equity in the 15%. And 2 years later, we bought out their 15% for the same price we paid them for the 85%, because the business scaled really nicely and it was worth. And basically, that's what you're looking for as a home run situation. For us, it was great. For them, it was a great exit. But that's the way we did it. But it's all about, as I keep on going back to, resourcefulness. You have to really identify what the seller wants to do, what you want to do. You want to have a lot of conversations with a lot of sellers, and you should be always having conversations with entrepreneurs. We love to talk about our future. So every time you meet someone who is a business owner, tell me about yourself. What are your goals? What really gets you excited? What are your goals for the future of their business? And they'll tell you. So when they talk about their next chapter in the next business, well, that's the opportunity for you. Okay,
So I love it. Well, I was gonna
that's
say,
like
so that
3 chapters.
you're in this chapters, when you got this 18-year chapter, because I know that's where I'll keep us on track and keep the thread going, Tom. But I think it was so fascinating is, so you've got this first 18-year chapter, and now, because like as we progress and as you have now figured out how to deploy capital and time and resources without having to be the operator and be the doer, that first 18-year chapter or section, whatever you want to call it, is you figuring out a lot of these core principles that you're now deploying in unique structures and unique ways. So anything else you're like, how did, like, what are some of the core principles you learned in that 18-year journey?
Um, I'm going to take you back to a prior chapter. If I say, what are my chapters at? My first, I'm going to say, what's my first chapter, out of high school, and forget about a little bit of time at Florida State. It was going through special forces, where I was given some core philosophies about people, what, and what real quality of character is, and exceptional teams can do together. That set the foundation. It taught me about tenacity in special forces. It tells me about is I never quit, ever. And so there's, these certain things you learn how to assess and reap and pivot, but you just don't quit. So there's certain things I learned: resourcefulness over resources. As you're going out in a mass casualty event, you never have enough resources. So it's about resourcefulness. Okay. So that was a chapter of incredible. I thought I was doing about impact because I was giving during those years, but really the gift is always the other way around, what it gave to me. Next chapter, let's skip over degrees in my first test businesses. But my first real business was in 1999. It was an online store. We mailed out, but I believed in omni-channel marketing. Again, it's your core philosophy. What I learned in that business is a couple of things. First of all, is you can build a brand that no one ever heard of through direct response marketing and become a really well-known national brand, which is what we did with that first business. It was an idea in my head, and we mailed out millions of catalogs. We had a dozen pages in the Sky Mall magazine. And because the pure online, offline, different platforms, people constantly saw it, we built this brand. And so I learned that. I learned on how to actually, again, it's the first time I built a large scale team, and what our responsibilities as leaders are. Our responsible leader is to transfer our vision, and we're ultimately an inverted pyramid as leaders. And we're there to give energy and support and the infrastructure for the team to succeed. Ultimately, we are responsible. If something's going wrong in our business, it's our fault. Its ultimate accountability is us. So if you're asking me, there are so many things I took from special forces, add into my first business: the team, the passion, ignore the big resumes, because that isn't necessarily the skill set you need. Those are great for consultants, but not necessarily employees. And and I got through a volume play, learning, building your gut, right? Someone told me, many, many years ago that you got to go through a lot of challenging experiences to develop a good gut, but your gut you have to listen to it.
I have this Tom, I have a really good buddy. I love his saying. He said, experience is what we get when we don't get what we want. Isn't that just because that's how
Yeah,
we
but
learn to get that's that gut. But I think that actually ties into, as a leader, you've learned these things, whether it's the special forces and then you're running a business and then you're transferring that experience to others through communication. Where, Tom, was there a unique situation or two where you're like, oh my gosh, people in business and this mobilization of people and teams in the business is just like the special forces? And how did you think about that?
I, that's what I learned in my business, and especially is this passionate team that is all in. You can do almost anything, regardless of. And let's be very clear: is there's very few businesses where you don't not only hit massive walls, you have a concrete wall fall on the business, shaking everyone's confidence, and even it's an existential threat to the business. Where I've been in. How many times have I been where my board of directors said, "You're done, fold it off, and just move on." My senior team said, "There's nothing we can do. We're done as a business. We might as well just liquidate." I can't tell you how many times that I've been in this situation. And what you find in those situations is as you have a level of certainty and clarity and honesty with your team, you can rally people to a level of greatness that they never experienced before, and their value and appreciation. And they're those people that you learn that can't live through that challenges, and they shouldn't be in your company. And that's fine. And so
What?
it's those experiences that taught me what basically reinforced what an incredible team, but it's about a team with passion and heart. And that's why I talk about it's our job as CEOs and leaders and founders to have this clear vision, but
Mhm.
transfer that vision to clarity to our teams that translate that into energy and clear direction.
I love it. And so one thing that I'm really fascinated about, how you're describing this is, so as a leader with having that clear vision, rallying the troops, because I had a similar experience, Tom, like with our business when we had, no money for payroll. And it's amazing what people will rally around as long as the culture, the leadership, the team, all that kind of stuff. But what I struggled with 15 years ago, one of the missions that I have, and I think you and I both are in a similar boat, is I didn't understand how the game of ownership and capitalism worked from valuations. So I had a fundamental misunderstanding 15 years ago of like what was the ultimate judgment. It wasn't revenue, it wasn't gross profit, it wasn't net income. It's like what creates value. And I see that as leaders, we could potentially rally people around something that's not a viable mission. So back to like your special forces, or back to being, like when do you quit? When do you not quit? And I think the only way is like, how do we understand value and what creates value? So how does your understanding of the game of value and valuation
Yeah.
in business tie into this?
Yeah, let's be crystal clear on here is, and it depends on what stage of the business. We have a startup, we have an early stage company. How many of the most successful, let's just talk about tech right now, but you can talk about almost any business, succeeded with the original vision or direction that they took, that they actually started at the very beginning. Even look
Right.
at PayPal if we go back many years and say that basically it was a feature of their massive stack of features that end up being what PayPal was. But if you look at most business, there was a pivot and a shift and things they learned and tested along the way that really dictated that. So yes, the original vision and what the original plan, original product might not worked, but look at your core, what you have from a team perspective, what resources, and you scan the marketplace and you identify other opportunities. And sometimes you have to double down and white knuckle it, and sometimes you pivot. You can't be pivoting every day or you don't have a business and your team has had whiplash. But there are times you test, you learn, and then you pivot accordingly. Now with larger businesses, it's a little more different. Is you have a great business, it's successful. You should always be spending 10 to 20% of your resource testing new products, new initiatives, and looking for what's next. And many times, as you know, that we built everything organically at Orlando Coast Brands. We, again, passed the first acquisition. And 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I doubled down on acquisitions, and I decided building brands from scratch is kind of like being dragged through asphalt and glass with very little certainty. Okay. Versus when you acquire a business, you have a good foundation. It's already been off the ground. You have great. I rather spend the same amount of resources scaling it from, let's say, 4 or 5 million to 100 million than all these resources and riskiness of never getting a business off the ground. Same thing with scaling.
Um, I can also resonate with that, because the turnaround with the family business that was doing 20 million to the turnaround to sale was easier than the couple of startups I've had over the last 10 years. I'd rather shoot myself in the face than do another startup. I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I didn't know that until after the sale. And then so Tom, but I'm tracking you, and I love it. The understanding of valuations is like what for me, Tom, it was like taking this red pill and like in the Matrix or the allegory of the cave. Like I was like, oh my God, there's a base layer of this game that I was unaware of. And then I realized as a leader, I wasn't able to explain to my team what was worth it or not. And what happened was that it changed the ability to view the pivot, the double down, or the buy the company, like how to spot value. And so like, how did that education change your perspective, and when did that happen?
Okay, so first of all, it happened. I thought I had the metric and the playbook for that when I started my first business, but it's when I bought my first business and you're on the other side, when we got in trouble, I started really understanding valuation and discount factors and things like due diligence and what you learn in a process when you do your acquisition. Then we did our second one. Obviously, then I was really plugged into multiples and what business value is. But then it also informed me on what we should be building. One of the greatest advice I got very early with starting as an entrepreneur, and it's the opposite of what you may think. Um, a lot of people, a lot of times people optimize very quickly for their exit value. And what someone told me early in my career, they said, Tom, if you build a great business with great fundamentals, you'll have a lot of buyers.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is I'm going to sell my business, so I'm going to hit the throttle and maximize revenue. I can't tell you how many businesses we're going to hit $100 million in revenue. Do you know how many businesses I've seen pursue that goal and blow up along the way? And I always say, and yeah, most, and you appreciate this is I use, maybe it's an extreme, but I like to make sure I'm landing this is I tell my team is I don't give a shit about revenue. I care about EBITDA. I care about cash flow. If we're optimizing for long-term strategy and optimizing our cash and our EBITDA and keeping our eye on that, it'll keep the business in check. And if you have strong EBITDA in your business and strong margins, there'll be a lot of buyers for that. And it's fundamentals. When I let me flip it the other way right now, Ryan. And I had this discussion this morning. Someone said, Tom, what do you look at in due diligence? What are you looking at? How do you value a business? And I said, let's start with this. The thing I'm looking for based on the multiple, which is how many years of cash flow I'm paying in advance for this business. I'm guaranteeing to whoever I'm buying it from. I'm looking at what is the probability that that'll sustain for at least that period of time or longer. For example, let's say it's $1 million business and they're valued at, let me be a little bit aggressive. They're good. They're having nice growth rate, nothing incredible. And basically their market value would be 5 times, okay, between 4 to 5 times multiple, depending on industry. But let's say five. I'm not talking about a SaaS business. So 5 times EBITDA on this business. It means that when I'm buying this business, I'm guaranteeing the owner 5 years of that, what he would be getting today, what he would earn over 5 years. Essentially, That's the deal. So I need to have the confidence that is. So what is it from a valuation we're looking for? I know what the industry multiples are. The the number that you multiply against the EBITDA, but
Hmm.
also I'm looking at factors such as what can be an existential threat. Well, all their one customer represents 80% of the business, and there's no guarantee that they're going to stay around long term. Or they have a lot of churn in customers. Again, I look at their customer mix. I look at, do they have a moat around this business? Is there some technology that's coming along that can blow this business out of the water? Do I have good feelings that their people are going to stick? Is there too much reliance? Is the CEO doing all the business development and leading all also delivery? So if the founder leaves, the business is in jeopardy. So again, everything is about that confidence. So everything is for valuation. Now flip the other way. When I want to sell my business, I want to signal to a buyer that this is a great business with great fundamentals and it's sticky. So therefore, the EBITDA is consistent, growing nicely. The customers, the way we're getting the customers in, and the lifetime value of customers are great, and there's not too much concentration of customers. That we have a wall, that we have great SOPs, that our team is strong. That if something happens to me, the company will still do well. So again, all these things is I want to give confidence to a buyer. So when I think about valuation, I not only think about multiples, I also think about what would a buyer be looking at my business, and I'm looking at building a strong business. I'm not just flooring it to one specific metric, which could blow up the business, which I've seen a lot of sellers do.
Well, what I a couple of the take, I love it, and completely uh, double or highlight and underline all that stuff. What I heard, which I thought was fascinating, is you learned this game through your first acquisition, and how many people have you and I both met that they learned that game when they're trying to sell for the first time. And it's like, you might as well F it up on an acquisition because you learn the same fundamentals, or you have to go to your conference or my training or something like that. Because if we don't understand the game, how do we know what we're supposed to be working on today? And that's like the whole, like, that back to, like, if you're in the special forces, you have a mission and it's very clear what the game and the rules are. And you, like, the only way you can understand whether to pivot or to double down is if you understand the context of your current situation versus what the mission is. And I love everything that you said. And that's where as within that context, I have a specific question for you on normalized EBITDA versus cash flow. I know, like, a lot of times people interchange those things, but you and I both know they're not the same, because normalized EBITDA is not cash. So even though normalized EBITDA and the multiple are 1,000 times better to look at for the judgment of the game versus revenue, and I'll give you some context, Tom, because I got a client that I've been beating this into his head. Um, Normalized EBITDA, if you're doing a roll up to sell, can be freaking awesome, right? He's been buying a bunch of $1 million companies and he's bolting things on. He's got the little private equity playbook. There's no freaking cash. So if he doesn't sell that freaking business, he like, if he keeps going at the rate he's going. So I said to him, you're in a decision tree right now. Because if you want ownership distributions after working capital, debt, and taxes and actual cash, which is a plan B, where you can actually keep this business, you can have 3 million in normalized EBITDA and no cash. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, let me start this way: is with our first business, if you think about growing a business to from basically 0 to 100 million, and you're doing it fast over like we did over 3 years, um, you're and especially in a product business, you're eating cash like nothing else.
How were you doing?
Now,
Were you doing inventory? So, like, did you have customer deposits? How was that cash coming in and out of the
we had, by
business?
the way, let's talk about it. We had to buy not only inventory, media. And we
Oh my
also
God.
had a model that we'd actually, this is pretty, people will find this, well, they won't find it unusual anymore. Imagine like before Afterpay. Now you have Afterpay, right? That people basically pay even for whatever skincare, and they do it on installments. But you have third party financing companies from Afterpay. When I was in the business, they didn't have those companies out there. So we did our own financing.
Oh,
So
good
we
Lord. You were the
so I'd
Afterpay.
sell we were the Afterpay. So we'd sell $150 worth
Oh
of
my God.
product and finance it over 3 months, which meant but basically our customer acquisition cost was, again, it was us 80% of our business was all subscription. So again, we had to get to month to 90 days to break even. And then the rest of it was pure cash. So it was
That's
a
that white
beautiful
knuckling.
business.
Get to month 3.
But basically so we're spending money, we're scaling, and the cash isn't catching up. So we're eating cash, but because we were profitable, then the goal is, okay, where do you get the money from? If you bring in equity is extremely expensive and you're giving away at that point, most of your company. The
Mhm.
other way of doing this is by bringing in debt, which is what we did. We found a great debt partners, and basically between cash flowing our receivable line as our senior, and then we had our mezzanine lender who gave us the growth capital, and then it was a great combination on what we used. And again, the ROI on that is, from yes, it was maybe expensive, but basically think about the ROI I got off of every dollar I borrowed, because basically I was able to recycle those dollars every 90 days. And I was able to make for every dollar that I borrowed, I was able to make a buck. So again, and recycling that 4 times. So was it really expensive? No, it wasn't. So again, but this is
Well,
where
that's the framing. Sorry to interrupt, Tom, but like that's the framing that like is so important if we're going to be capital allocators, because the goal is to get the return on the equity. And that's where like if we shift our mindset and it's like you got people arguing over a percent on a 10-year loan. I'm like, it's cheap debt, fixed rate, even if it's 9%, lock it in, go grow your company. And it's just a whole mindset shift back to the whole fundamentals of the game that we're playing.
um, and that's what it is I always looked at what was return on capital, and especially if we're growing business, and I know we could flatline the business or slow down the growth drastically at any point whatsoever. And when that happens, then you're paying down the loans, cash is coming in because you're generating, remember over time, this little business that $331,000 business that lost a little bit of money. Over time, we had consistent $6 to $7 million of EBITDA a year, growing to 9.5 at the very end when we sold to private equity. But again, that's just the power of that model. And when you slow down the growth, that's what happens. But yes, you have to really know your numbers. Let me also share with this on another philosophy I have on the cost of capital. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I told you that I'm recommending for you to go get a loan for 20 between 25 to 30% interest to buy a company, what would you say to me?
What's the return that I'm trying to get? And
Yeah,
what's the
yeah,
goal?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what's it? So let me just put this in context. We bought two businesses where we negotiated the cash price at close between 5 to 10% of the enterprise value. The rest of it was seller notes that we financed at 5 to 6% interest. So we had it. So what with certainty go out and basically generate the cash. So I was able to go, and this is just revenue advance lenders are extremely expensive. There's some good ones. There's some really ones that are egregious, but there's some good ones out there. It's expensive capital, but it's capital with certainty. You can borrow 1 to 2 times on the monthly revenue of a business. You can close within a week. So we're able to get acquisition capital and then refinance it after that. But we can
Mm-hmm.
close within a week. We can pay the 5% cash at close. And now we have a business but you look at the average cost. So we pay 25% for 5% of the business. And for 95%, we're averaging at a 6% interest rate. That's a pretty good cost of capital.
Well, and
You
it's
look
so
at,
fat. It is, and it's so fascinating because in my training, I break down the discounted cash flow valuation
Mhm.
versus the weighted average cost of capital and how that is the inverse of the multiple. And like
Yeah,
you start messing around with the debt to equity ratios and stuff like that. But here's what's fascinating is I mean, even in your space over the last 7 years, I mean, I had a little bit of exposure time to like the FBA space of the Amazon, and like how many of these people don't understand, or even like honestly, the private equity space over the last 7 years, cheap debt. People went in and bought a bunch of companies because they're again doing the normalized EBITDA, the debt, the multiple, and it's kind of like when my dad bought a house on a one check stub on a FICO score in 2007. Like that's kind of what I've been watching in the PE space
yeah.
because of the cheap debt. It's awesome if you understand the game and the rules, like what you're talking about, and then you have a plan to service the debt and you understand the risk and the viability of those future cash flows. And that's the kind of going back to the
And you
normalized
bake that
EBITDA versus cash.
you bake that into your agreement. and agreements such as seller notes. When I buy a business and it's on seller notes, I said, well, you love your employees, you love your clients. We want to make sure that if there's a downturn, you don't want to put your employees and your customer. So let's just develop. So I'm guaranteeing the money, but let's put some backstops in. So if the revenue and EBITDA drops for whatever reason to a certain level, then we're going to extend out the payment so we're not killing the business. So there's ways to structure deals to protect
Mm-hmm.
you and protect the business that everyone has an interest in. Um,
So
so
then
when
how
I
go back?
go
Oh,
on,
go ahead. Sorry.
go
No,
on.
go ahead. Well, I
No,
was
as
just
far as going back to your original question. So
okay. That was where I was going about the normalized EBITDA versus cash flow, and like how you think about those two versus in like
yeah.
how the end game that you're marching towards.
So the end game is what I'm really optimizing. And a lot of businesses that I do is I'm optimizing to sell at some point. Period. Okay. So what I do is, or it's going to be generating a lot of cash flow after the debt is paid off. Period of that business. Most businesses, I'm basically focusing on a sale perspective. So I need to met your cash flow is your oxygen. You run out of oxygen, you're dead. Your business runs out of cash and you have no way of fulfilling it, your business dies. So you need to preserve and keep. And listen, I'm a medic. So you start with the windpipe. Is the windpipe open? Is the airway open? So that's where you start with. Okay. Same with the business. You need to make sure you're preserving cash and you really have your eye on the cash of the business and you're making sure you don't run out of cash in this game. But then your goal is to figure out a way to deploy capital and resources to maximize your EBITDA. Now, let's just talk about we talked about this, the ninth wonder of the world, multiple expansion. Okay. I love it is, and for people, I'm sure some of you that are listening understand this, but why it's the miracle of the world is that um, as a business, EBITDA gets larger, as the net profit of business gets larger, EBITDA of the business, what's happened is that there's less competition for less companies having larger EBITDA. There are a lot of companies out there with $250,000 a year EBITDA. There's less than 1 million, there's less than 10 million, there's less than 50 million. There's a lot of money out in the marketplace. And what big money says is the larger of a company, the larger the EBITDA, the lower the risk. So they will spend more and pay more and more as far as the valuing a multiple on that EBITDA. So that's really why you're getting paid more for more reliable businesses that people can predict the future of with it and where the money is going to. Now, let's pretend this is I'm buying one business at 3 times EBITDA for $500,000 and another business for, let me make my math easy on it. So basically that business is worth $1.5 million. I'm buying another business for $500,000 EBITDA for 3 times multiple. So now that business is worth $1.5 million. I put them both together. Now I have a business that has $1 million EBITDA, but it's not worth 3 times multiple. It has $1 million EBITDA. It's worth 4 times. If it's a good business, everything else remains the same. So suddenly I put these two $1.5 million valued business together and they're worth $4 million. So out of thin air, I created $1 million of value. That's the beauty of acquisitions and growing EBITDA and stacking EBITDA. Now, I love to stack EBITDA with organic growth and then also with acquisition growth. Ryan, we spoke about this. Let me share my most favorite data point. I want people to understand. If you've been in business long enough and you have a stable business, yeah, your first years might have been massive growth, 30, 40, 50, 70, 100%. But at a certain point, you reach a steady state of growth. And let's say you're grinding it. Some years you hit 20%, some years you hit 5%, some years you have black swan events, which happens on a regular basis, either to your specific business or COVID in the marketplace, things like that, or 2008. So on average, you look back in the last 5 years, you grew by 10%. Congratulations, you just increased the value of your business by 50%. Now you take the value of inflation and add it to it, so it's not really 50%. But congratulations. Now, if
Which,
you
by the way,
and
is the same
remember
as
how
the
much.
cost of capital in the S&P 500, right? When you really
Yes,
start,
yes, 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 yes.
go.
So yeah, exactly. So now imagine all the resources you put into sales, development, retention of your clients. You've also spent it on new products, new initiative, new channels. Now imagine if you spend 5% of your resources a year on buying a business and you simply follow a set methodology and you buy one business, one half your size every year. for 5 years. One business, half your size. And that happens by having a lot of seller conversations. If you do that, you've increased the value of your business, not by 50%, by 1,200%. The strategic options that you have on where you can grow your business are dramatically changed after their 5 years. If you decide to sell your business, the value you're going to sell your business for and the amount that creates that diagnostic wealth or generational wealth you're looking for, it's happening there. And again, there are formulas to do this. I don't say do this irresponsible. There are process and system. I'm an industrial engineer. You take complex and make it boring. And there's ways and methodologies to responsibly buy businesses. But that's why I'm very big to leaning into it, because at Atlantic Coast Brands, we grew like this. And then we maintain that 100 to 125 million. But at a certain point, we steady state between 175 and 100 million every year. At that point, rather than just going all in and constantly launching new products and new channels, and really focused on going back to our original playbook of acquisitions, and basically grew through acquisitions. And then once we had profit, buying a profitable business and then scaling it through our methodology we were really good at, again, our everything would have been so much easier than the gale force winds we faced along the way.
So I love it too. And I've had Adam Coffey on the show a couple of times, and he talks about his 30% compound annual growth rate, where a third of that comes from acquisitions. I don't know if you've met I've got another buddy, Nick Bradley, who's in that space too. He talks a lot about this. And so one thing that I find fascinating, I'm just eyeing the time, I know I got like 15 minutes here, is the practicality of truly building a good business with this. So I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth because I want to actually hear your reaction to this, Tom.
Please do.
Because everything you just said, I think, is very valid. And I think the only way we can see that lens of the game is if we understand valuations like we've already discussed. So like totally check, like, yep, like this is the game, regardless of what people think, because this is how companies are valued, and like valuation is the ultimate judgment when and how you transition that value or purchase value. The challenge that I have seen over the last 7 years is the complete dysfunction of watching which is the actual game, but be played where if you peek under the hood, it's a total effing disaster. The CRMs are not integrated. The ERP systems are not integrated. You have dysfunctional teams. Like if you were to like go back to your special forces and like, by the way, Tom, you're about to go on a mission and Ryan is now your new teammate. Ryan doesn't know who you are, what you're doing, where you're going. And now you're just going to pretend that this all works together. And I know I'm kind of planting the seeds. I think you've helped solve part of this problem, but like I've watched in the Amazon FBA space, the e-commerce space, the SaaS space, home services over the last 7 years, people bolt on these companies and you're like, this is such a dumpster fire. And like the game of like, whether it's a public company who has a 90-day earnings report that they need to go from 100 million in normalized EBITDA to 110. I mean, I had a client who they were 6.5 million in normalized EBITDA. They sold to a PE firm that was 35 plus 6.5 is over than 40. Now everybody's more wealthy. They still have an AS 400 and it's a shitty operating business. But so like the 41.5 million normalized EBITDA didn't solve the fact that now that they're spending 90 grand a month with, is it KPMG or EY, with 25-year-olds with PowerPoint stuff going integration, and they still have a freaking mainframe. So like at some point that company's got to generate actual cash. So like, how do you balance the game versus building good businesses?
Okay. I'll start with this I believe if you don't play the game right, we'll start with this. If you don't have let's start with the strategy and a process for doing this, you end up with Frankenstein. The concept, the concept was great that he was doing, right?
Yeah.
But what he ended up doing is he ended up being Frankenstein, and that's what you're going to get with your businesses. So I start is, what is the thesis of what I'm building? What is complementary? I'm not going to, if you are buying business purely for EBITDA and not being complementary, you're an idiot. You can quote me on that, okay?
I love it.
And I know that a lot of people are doing that. Well, if I just slap these three businesses together, imagine they have $3 million EBITDA. Now suddenly we're at $9 million. Look at the way we're valued, but they're not looking at how they're grouped together and what they really are and who would be the buyer. Because remember, let's go back to our first one. A person we talked about is the value of a company is relative to what a buyer will pay for it. A buyer will pay for it. What is the confidence and the predictability of their cash flow, of their customers, and what it means to their business coming in? The lower the confidence, lower. So that's what we're trying to solve for. So as you know, what is the theme? What is the unique that I'm trying to build with my acquisitions? What problems am I solving for in my business? And then it also is really understanding that what does cultural alignment mean? Is you can't, if I was to, there's certain companies that have massive culture classes, which creates challenges. Those companies that are maybe touchy feely, softer, and it really works well for them, but they merge with a company that has sharp elbows. That's very profitable with these sharp elbows. There's going to be some culture, and I said start with people. So I start with the people and the culture, the team, and I will not buy business if it doesn't feel right instinctively that it's the right culture, it's the right environment that goes well with my environment. So first of all, it's strategically how does it fit? Does it solve a problem we're going to do? What are the biggest challenges? And then ultimately is what is the long-term and the integration playbook on this? There are some times where you buy a business and you intentionally keep their IT separate because that's not where the value comes from. Or is it from integration? I don't know. So again, these are decisions you have to make along the way. When I do an acquisition, I play the balance between do no harm and what's the right thing long term and what's the time frame to do that. But understanding that remember, Ryan, I'm a systems thinker. I was raised as an industrial engineer, but my degree is in it. And what I learned a long time ago is that everything affects everything. You need to think about things as systems, and everything is touching each other. So, how do people, processes, systems? How does it actually and profit? How does that actually intertwine when you put these businesses together and really think it through? And having buy off from the team and really clear direction how you're going to handle this, using your due diligence process to inform the most important day one, what happens after that, and really having that tight plan there. That's what due diligence is, to either one, find reasons to walk away from a deal, deep due diligence. Due diligence next is basically informs how you're going to address the issues that you found. You'll list find issues. You're going to solve it in the before the close, in the purchase agreement, or after close, and who's going to do that. But most important, it's all to develop your 30, 60, 90, and 12-month plan and the long-term plan.
What I love about what you're saying, and I think if you and I have spent a lot more time together, like it's the systems thinking. And so, Tom, my audience hears me talk a lot about this 3-statement model. So I have, it'd be so fascinating to get your reactions to it. My old business partner created, who's the smartest CFO I've ever met. And you take your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement, you mathematically tie them together, but then you mathematically forecast them out. So the first year, every column is all 3 statements tied together. So there's 12 columns for year 1. And then years 2 through 5 are a whole column with some growth rates and revenue, cost of goods, overhead. But what we're able to see, Tom, is that because I'm a systems thinker too, is at the end of year 1, cash position. And then the end of year 5, cash position is like the mitochondria of our body. And like if you have a plane, aeronautical engineering, it either blows up or it doesn't, right? Like it's a closed system. And cash, and this is where it's fascinating and why I asked you the EBITDA versus the cash position, and then how we can see the capital and the cost of capital is because everything touches cash. Like everything is a derivative of cash. However, what we can do is then, if we know that normalized EBITDA will be $5 million, but we can see then, so that's in the income statement, but then we can go down and see the cash position, our working capital, our debt, taxes. We can say, okay, we're still healthy here, but we can see the correlation between the two, and we're not isolating just one and optimizing for just one. And so it's a whole closed system. And when you go think about then the acquisitions, the due diligence and everything you're talking about, as a systems thinker, what I'm hearing you say is you're always balancing the variables against each other. And I've just watched just the pure destructive behavior, Tom, over the last 5+ years because people are picking one data point. And even if it is normalized EBITDA, you can get into a problem because the thing's got to generate cash at some point.
Yep. You're 100% correct there.
How are you doing it in your current firm? Because I thought it was very fascinating where instead, like, you've got a different strategy of how you're getting owners and companies and portfolios to collaborate to solve this integration challenge.
So, well, there's two things. One is context. I have the Foundry Brands, which I launched 5 years ago. I'm a passive investor there, so not active in that roll up. We sold our last agency in our agency roll up, and my next platform that I think we discussed is going to be in Q2 of next year.
Got it. So you're in the process of working on it.
I'm solving something that it hasn't been done, or when I've seen it's been done wrong. And I'm looking to build my next roll-up platform, reducing the risk, which means I'm reducing some of my upside, but I'm helping. What I want to do is I want to partner with 100 founders a year and change their lives and basically create that diagnostic wealth or that generational wealth for them. So what is the building? And I always look at what is it? And I always look at the first, second, and third order impact. Now, just for those that are listening, let's just think about Tom. What the hell are you talking about? First, second, and third order impact. Okay, let's go back a few years. Model T, Henry Ford creates these productions very efficiently. Millions of cars are coming off the production line. So, what's the first order impact? Well, that's very, very clear. It's impacting life's consumers, and the first order impact is as obvious. Is we need gas stations across the country. So suddenly, Standard Oil and everyone else started building gas stations that people can go. Therefore, people are traveling further. And then what's the second order impact? Wow, they have nowhere to eat. So therefore, you see restaurants popping up everywhere. Okay. They're going further. Now they're actually eating and they're staying out. Now they're even going even further and doing road works. Okay. Again, so a lot of booms are happening, but then they're running out of places to stay, guest houses with the different blue books that are out, things like that. So then, so what did they do is then there started to be the first motel and hotel chains created across the country. So the foundations of hotel and motels are from that period of time. So first, second, third order impact. We are in this incredible revolution in the United States. As we talked about, 1,000 business owners are retiring every day. One thing, okay? But we also have the AI impact that's happening. Basically, is I don't know how many years it'll be before 30 or 40% of the current jobs are no longer there. Companies are either they're AI relevant or they're not, but it's putting a lot of pressure and stress on business owners. Some more want to retire. But with every business, you need to think about is what's the long-term impact on this business and how do we keep it relevant? Now, how do I take this and when I'm buying a business, I'm taking a 5-year to 10-year bet on a business. So what I say, but my goal is if I buy a business, I'm only impacting a few partners that I bring in, like I did in my first business, where we brought 85% of the business, but they got double the value because they rolled their 15%. So how can I do this with impacting more? The model is very simple. I think about the theme. What would be a great business in 3 years from now? Now let me find 5 to 6 business owners that are making between $1 to $2 million of EBITDA. What is $1 to $2 million? We talked about it is the valley of despair. Why is if congratulations, you built a very profitable business. The challenge is you're making so much money, unless you put a lot of money away and you're ready for retirement and walk away, you cannot make enough by the sale of the business. You're going to get max, you're going to net 4 to 5 times that on the business. 75% of owners never get their earnout. So again, what are you going to net out of the business? But then is 4 or 5 times what your current cash for the business. Is that enough for you or you and your partner to
You're
basically
live forever? Keep it or sell it hamster wheel. That just you can't get. And I call it escape velocity, Tom. Like you can't get out of that. Yeah.
That's it. So what I want to do is I want to partner with those. I want to group together great entrepreneurs with great businesses that want to actually need to double to triple the value of their business. I'm going to get those business, but it has to be a tight theme on the business. We're going to group those owners together, and we're going to spend over 2 years merging the businesses, integrating, building an AI backbone on the business, building a parent brand on the business. Now, the decisions that we've made, what the parent brand is, how we're going to sell, how they're going to work together, who is going to be in the different roles, that is decided by the business owners. And very simply is it's 6 months of dating before we're married. 6 months, we have a virtual merger agreement. At 6 months, we're formally merging. If someone wants to leave, then leave. We need to make sure we have the right entrepreneurs in the room that have the EQ and IQ to work great together to build something really special. Let's face it, we just shared that if you're selling your business and if you're doing $1 to $2 million of EBITDA, the probability you successfully selling your business is 35%. Most businesses will have failed processes. Okay. But once you have 9 to 10 million of EBITDA, the probability of selling is you have to really screw up not to sell. You will sell the business. Now, will it be for a higher value of the current business? That's the gamble that I'm willing to take and my team willing to take we're gonna share a piece of the upside. And if we only help you sell your business, but not for the upside, we work for 2 to 3 years for free. So that's the value proposition. It's a merge to exit platform. And my goal is to build originally 4 groups per year and eventually do 12 groups a year. And therefore, we get to impact somewhere at 12, we're impacting 24 founders a year if they have a partner. And looking at that, but then look at all the velocity of all the companies we're impacting the wrong way. We'll have $1 billion in asset under management, but we're building the best flywheel that's out there that no one's ever done in order to change the life of businesses of these owners.
You're doing the hard work up front, which what I'm hearing you say is you're willing to, because all the stuff that I said that people aren't doing, you're doing that up front. And then once you paper everything, it becomes like a no-brainer. It's like a non-event. I mean, that's what I've noticed with the clients I've worked with over the years. Times once they're ready, once they understand this stuff, and it's like I had a client where we just worked on a internal buyout for him, and he looked at the piece of paper, which is the plan. He's like, "This is very simple." And I said, "A year and a half ago, you didn't know what any of those words meant." So yes, it is simple, but if you don't understand, so you're doing the hard work, betting on the fact that if you do the hard work, that because that the game is played the way that we're talking about. And what I heard you say is you're doing all the hard work that I think everybody's going to get caught with their pants down because they didn't do the hard work, because the hard work is what yields the cash.
Yes. And let's talk about this. What can we do also? What really is fun is there are always business out there with partnership problems. We can solve the partnership problems where they can't decide which way to go. This is structure. We can help solve that, even potentially buy a partner who wants to get out now, buy them out and let the second one last for 2 years. We can also help them we can increase value by doing tuck-in acquisitions into this platform, increasing the value of their specific business, whether they're an agency, whether they're a roofing company, different home service. We can increase the value by doing tuck-in acquisitions. And again, everything is about, it's a fun game by employing everything that we've learned painfully over the last couple of decades. And basically why, because as you said, if you've never sold your business, you're basically taking all the risk. When you do more than one acquisition, when you've been involved with multiple acquisition exits, you're basically leveraging a playbook.
Yeah. I know you got to run. I want to plant a seed because there's probably an argument for us to have part 2 of this. I ran an entire fund business model based on what you're discussing because of my coaching business. I was just kind of playing around with GPT. I spent almost an entire day with it. And how an ESOP, I don't know how familiar you are with employee stock ownership plans, you can pre-engineer that valuation and that deal structure with, the bank debt, the mezz financing, the warrants and all this shit, because it's all based on cash flow. So you're actually eliminating some of the third party risk of having the economic climate. So I had an entire IRR business model, Tom, built out based on rolling out 5 to 7 companies, getting to that normalized EBITDA, how much debt, how much equity, the warrants and all that stuff as an ESOP. And then all of a sudden now you got employee ownership, and the impact is an order of magnitude higher than a third party sale. But we probably don't have enough time
Ryan,
for that right now.
What we're not going to talk about right now is, I think over the next 5 years, it could be as early as 3 years, is we're going to see Robinhood having, and other platforms like that, have marketplace for outside investors
tokenizing
into private companies, tokenizing into private companies, so they don't have to be listed on stock markets. But it's a way for them to actually create a valuation. So we have a new world that's opening up to it, which will also create some liquidity events, which could be
Yeah,
an interesting exit. So
that's got to be part 2, man. This is so fun, Tom.
great.
Where can people find you?
Okay. Two different places. One is tshipley.com, and we're running our next. I love to work with entrepreneurs that have 7 to 9 figure businesses. Every 6 months, for the time being, we're running every 6 months. We have Dealcon, CEO M&A Summit. We have 150 phenomenal 7 to 9 figure entrepreneurs that get together. This time it's in Miami from February 9th through the 11th. If you want information on that, go to dealconlive.com. And you cannot help, once you see, you can't unsee it. You can't help but being transformed with the room of people that we put together. Brian,
Tom, I'll put
absolute
those
pleasure.
links in. Thanks so much, my friend.
And maybe we can get you there. Okay. Take
See you,
care,
Tom.
my friend. Okay, bye.